How's everyone feeling? Any thoughts, comments, certainly for those new writers on board? It would be appreciated to hear any of your thoughts following last week. Still excited about it? Not wanting to be here? Wanting to be here?
I got an email that gave us a Google address and then Moodle, and then click that to log in. I couldn't log in.
You couldn't log in?
Oh my God.
Oh, there's your man.
Now you tell me. Did you send me an email? Did you call me? Did you come and see me? That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, Graham is on hand, almost 24/7.
Not too late, don't
Come and
worry.
see me, come and see me.
Yeah, I'll come see you tomorrow.
No.
Okay, did anyone else have any problem accessing Moodle?
It was down yesterday afternoon, as you would know from
For a
an
little
email
bit.
I sent out. It was down for about 35, 40 minutes. That was it.
But everyone else managed to have a look, did they? Catherine?
No.
Not yet, okay.
Not yet.
So you're not sure whether you can log on?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll
Do-
email you though.
Do have a look, yeah, and speak to Graham if you can't. And thanks to those who did log on and started having some discussion about the flipped cup of tea from last week. So that was a bit of the program manager's homework of what we looked at, and Tina and I both had a little bit of a go at it, and we'll show you on here. We did put it up on the Moodle page. So scrolling down, all of the information from last week can be found there. So we had the presentations, the expectations from a student perspective of the blended learning environment, and the sessional lecturer job description. That was just the things that went out in your green folder last week. So if you lost a copy of those, or if anyone who wasn't here, then we've got additional copies on the website.
Why is the first one totally blank? That's unusual. Normally you see like a thumbnail of the video.
Pass. That's
Yeah.
It's really
Pass.
interesting.
It's the video that we did last week of the workshop, and it works. Like if you play it, it works.
Just
But I'm not.
unusual.
Yeah.
Normally it just captures a thumbnail.
I can ask Ruben,
Perhaps it's a
multimedia
blank
man.
middle thumbnail.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's on there. We'll have a look at how I initially broke down the making of a cup of tea. So I thought, right, if someone needs to learn how they're going to make a cup of tea, and I know that according to this flipped learning environment that I need between 2 and 6 concepts, what's going to be most suitable for someone to be able to learn how to make a cup of tea? I thought, well, first things first, let's get some safety out of the way. So we'll go through some tea safety. Second thing, generally have to get boiling the water. Different methods of boiling the water, I'm sure are very important to know. Different temperatures that you might get to. And then obviously tea selection, and whether you're going to go for English breakfast, probably the best tea going, but I'm sure there's some Australian versions as well. Milk selection, whether you're going to go organic, whether you're going to go standard.
Or soy.
Or soy, yes, for those sort of lacto, dairy intolerant people, different options going out there. But what I looked at and gave some examples of was something a bit more specific. I took one of the concepts, the mixing of the ingredients, and thought, right, how am I going to break those down and cover all of the elements of the flipped classroom that's going to be important to cover? So firstly, there's some audio-visual media, and that's either that voiced over PowerPoint, the Camtasia if you decide to use that technology, or some sort of video online that explains the mixing of the ingredients. If you get a chance, you can have a look at, there's a very eloquently explained English lady explaining how to make a cup of tea very nicely on there. And some quite interesting readings actually about the various different toxin levels and benefits of various different types of tea, and then a worksheet to try and help you get through that. So that worksheet is the first place the student's probably going to go within that concept and have a look, right, what do I need to do for this concept? And that's just going to explain, now that they've learned the safety aspects about boiling water and what we've covered previously. Is that a bit small at the moment? It's then taking the students through that concept. So they're looking through the PowerPoint 1.5 where they articulate and listing down 3 key theories. So it's just some guided direction into how they should look through that first PowerPoint. Then gone through some questions regarding the video that's online, and some additional theories we've got here. So we've got a task for the students to do. So it's asking them to contribute to the discussion forum for that week, relating to how do I consider the standard technique of mixing teas, any conflicting viewpoints between the different authors' arguments in the related readings, and they can go back and look through that and have some kind of collaborative discussion. Okay, as you know, and we talked about briefly last week, and we'll go into the details of this with Louise next week or the week after, we've then got concept questions to help the students out and check that they're on the right lines. We've got traditionally, why was milk poured into the cup prior to boiling water? Does anyone know that without looking there?
I didn't do that with your tea.
That's all right, I've got a paper cup, I can get away with it. So,
Is that so they could measure it first, how much they wanted?
No, but that is one of the wrong answers to be able to accurately measure your milk quantity. So these concept questions are designed to give similar type of answers, that if the students don't really get that concept, they may answer that. And they're going to get some feedback if they say that. So although this may help with the volume, it will not help to show the strength. This can be seen by adding the milk later and judging by the colour. But what the actual original, or the correct answer is, due to the poor quality china that was originally used, it would often crack if you put boiling water in first. So you put milk in and then boiling water afterwards. But then later that changed. Maybe sort of 50, 100 years later, when the china got better, it was a sign that you were nice and affluent and you could afford posh china if you put your boiling water in first and then your milk afterwards, to show that your china wouldn't crack. So it was a kind of show-off thing.
Have it on milk.
I learned all this just by creating some concept questions about tea. But you can see some examples of how they fit together and the type of feedback that they'll get. So that's going to be per concept. And then if you remember, the knowledge check is going to be one of the last sort of overarching few questions to think, right, has the students grasped all the necessary concepts of this week? And it's just 2 or 3 questions that they're almost statements. They don't have to do work for it, but they're statements to check and for the students to mark themselves. Can I confidently describe and explain the key safety points to consider when making a hot beverage? If not, then I need to go back and have a look through that material. If you are confident, then I can be confident that I'm going to get through those points of the assessment. And there's a few other bits to look at as well. So Tino took it fairly similar, but you can see Tino's ideas here. Are these videos linked, Tino?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
Are you not
Do you mind if we play one?
I was very impressed, Tina.
I was quite impressed with Tino's work here. So this is his audio-visual section. Thank you very much. Get surround sound as well, Tino.
Yeah.
Oh, is this not going to work?
Turn it on the wall. Turn the
We're
button
not
on.
connected.
On here.
Coarser than they were, because as it was before, it was set for a 2-cup pour. Okay, so what I've done is I've just put the grinder up 3 notches, and so making the coffee grinds coarser than they were, because as it was before, it was set for a 2-cup pour. I'm now setting it for a 1-cup pour. Now, what happens is that so the coarser the grinds, the faster the water will flow through. And because the filter basket for a 1-cupper, there's a lot less holes, and so the coffee has to be a little bit coarser, otherwise the water will struggle to get through, and yeah, you'll end up with no coffee basically. So I've just put the coffee grinds into the filter basket and still filling it up there to the appropriate level, and around about 10 grams of coffee for a 1 cup. I'm just tamping it, and just with a little bit of pressure, not too much. Otherwise, again, so the coffee will struggle to get out.
Okay, thank you, Tino.
No problem.
Okay, we can put those lights back on, please. We won't go through all the videos, but if you want to, then they're up online for you to have a look at and get Tino's views on coffee making.
It was only for fun. By no means professional.
So you did the video first and then did the audio afterwards?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can.
So
I
much
just did it
easier.
on my iPad. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you can sort of you can adjust the volume of the initial video. So the grinder was really loud, so I popped the volume down and then spoke over it.
And you recorded that on your iPad.
Yes, very easy to do using iMovie. So it's really easy. Yeah.
Was it someone else holding the?
Yeah.
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 Is it easy to turn these just front lights
Yeah.
off, Tina, if you can?
This is the bottom two.
So we've got some of Tino's concept questions. When you, when will they be getting their USB? Week 3 or 4?
Maybe next week, yeah.
Maybe next week. Okay. So you will get given a USB stick, which has like a breakdown of each week, and then separate folders where you need to put each of the information. So it's really nice and clear and laid out for you. So it'll be a separate small document per section. So you'll have the concept questions here. Tino's asking about his coffee beans. He's just got some simple true or false ones here.
And it's based on the video.
Yeah. And then there's other examples of worksheets and further reading around the topic on there. Did you want me to go into any of those, Tino, or?
No,
Okay. I thought it might be. So, at the moment, this is what we've got up for week 2's workshop. So you should have been given a course overview. If you've got a course overview that looks something like that, specific to your modality, yeah?
Chinese medicine will be different.
Chinese medicine's, yeah, a little bit different. Okay, so the aims of today, we're going to try and familiarise ourselves with the specific learning outcomes. So we've all got different learning outcomes for your subject. And then we're going to understand the importance of constructive alignment, which is 3 elements that we need to look at to make sure that our learning and our assessment and our methods of teaching all align together for mastery of learning and for effective student learning. And we're going to get started with creating the assessments pretty soon. And to complement those assessments, we're going to have a look at how we can use assessment rubrics, which ones we've got available for you to use at the moment, and then which ones you might want to create yourself. So Louise discussed these elements last week, and it started with the assessments that we're going to do today. So rather than looking at all the content, we're going to have a look at what assessments we can create to meet the learning outcomes, because that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to assess the content, we're trying to assess the learning outcomes, and that's really important and what we're going to look at today. So if you can have a look at the information which Aileen and Jane gave to you a few minutes ago, you should be able to find an overview of your assessment. So if you can flip to that. Yeah, that's it.
That would be in the subject outline, not in the course outline. So the top document will be your course outline, the second document will be a subject outline, and the third document would be a breakdown of topics.
Assessment, no, one more. So assessment is this section there. So it should be 2.4. Is that the same on everyone's? Yeah. Okay, so what you're looking at there is what's been validated and what's gone to TEXA, the accrediting body for the degrees, and that's what they're expecting us to do. So we're pretty stuck to that. But there's some discussion around it that you can have with your program manager if there's a real important need as to why that might need to change. But in general, they need to stick and stay how they are. So there's no changing of that as you go. So types of assessments, Tina's just going to jot them down on the board as we go. If we take Rob, for example, what assessments have you got there? What type?
So I've got 2 assessments. One's a quiz.
Yeah?
Sorry, I've got 2 quizzes in weeks 3 and 6. Both were 20% each.
Okay.
And a 3,000-word essay at the end of the semester.
Worth
6%.
Worth 60%, okay. So we've got 3,000 word essay.
Yeah.
What have you got?
I've got week 6 and an essay,
Okay.
and then an exam at the end.
So an end of trimester written exam, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. What subject's that?
That is fast management.
Okay, lifestyle management. Great. Kathleen, have you got anything different?
No, same as that, same exam.
Same as that?
I've got something a bit unusual that I'd like to discuss.
Okay, excellent. What have you got?
Assessment 2, which is ongoing, is active participation in a wiki group to compare and contrast different approaches to clinical practice, 750 words. Now the reality of that is that when you have 30 students all putting 750 words onto a wiki to be assessed, and one of them puts in some material that's not clean and it corrupts the whole of the rest of it, you lose all the students' assessment work. And you take hours recovering it all.
Okay.
And I spent
This
hours.
is
Something you've got experience of, Graham?
This is very true. What you need to do when you're using a wiki in Moodle to try and avoid this from happening is create pages for your students to put their work in there rather than copying and pasting like tables. Because there's a lot of formatting behind a table. So if you copy a table in Word and paste it into Moodle, you don't know this, but you're bringing across all of this, what I call formatting gunk. And Moodle gets confused sometimes, and then you end up with what happened with Mark. You end up with a whole page of what I call Egyptian hieroglyphics, which is where the formatting HTML's gone haywire, and it's a nightmare to fix. So I've said with wikis, tell your students not to copy and paste directly into Word, and do not copy and paste tables, because that's complex formatting.
So there's ways around it?
There are ways around it,
to make sure that...
You just
so I'm
have
saying,
one student make one mistake,
that's right.
and it's gone.
That's right. But there's ways around that to make sure that doesn't happen?
When it happens, it's happened. You can't.
Okay, but prior to starting the subject, can we work with Graham to set up separate pages? Will that prevent that from happening?
Yes,
that's what we spoke about. Okay, good. Did you have a question?
What's a wiki?
Okay, can you explain what a wiki is?
It's like a collaborative web page, effectively. You know, everyone has an opportunity to contribute. But the danger is, and there's like an audit trail, so you can undo changes that have been made. So it's like a living document. Students contribute, they add their bit, they edit someone else's content and so on, if you give them the option of doing that. And so at the end of it, you come up with something, you know, synergistically speaking, which is, you know, much better than the individual parts.
So that's kind of the basis behind Wikipedia, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Source.
I love wikis. They're great. But yeah, there are dangers. And also, you need to manage them as well, because students can put content in there that's totally inappropriate.
Yeah.
So you've got to go in there and keep an eye on things and remove that content, and then maybe let that student know why you've removed that content. So you need to put parameters in place before you launch into a wiki.
That's quite specific for the people doing wikis, so we can get into the more detail of that later on.
Yeah.
Anyone got any other different assessment types? Oral presentation?
I've got a food monograph for assessment 2. So this is for the nutritional medicine course.
Okay.
So I've got a food monograph and 1,250 word essay. Oh no, sorry, the food monograph has to be 1,250 words. So it's just creating a monograph on 2 chosen whole foods using historical and contemporary research.
Do you know what a monograph is?
One graph.
Okay.
It's probably just like a one, like maybe just like a, you know, what type of food and then like the name, all that.
Okay. Alright, any other types?
I've actually got a literature review, but my students actually asked me if that's too different from an essay.
It depends on the way it's set out. So, what subject is it for?
Integrated pharmacology and biochemistry.
So what was the question that the students asked?
Is it different from an essay?
It depends on how many words, I suppose.
Okay.
That we've got it set at, like, you know, if it was.
1,500 for this one.
Yeah, it's not much different than an essay in this case. Yeah.
Sometimes I guess a literature review might have specific questions they might have to answer in relation to the review, whereas an essay might be like on a topic, a broader. Potentially, I haven't seen what the literature reviews look like.
Yeah, if that's all we've got, so we do write them so they're purposely quite vague, so we've got the opportunity, that's what's gone to text, so that has to fit within that remit, but then you get the chance to make it whatever, however you feel is going to best match those learning outcomes and suit the students in that class. So you've got the flexibility to do it like an essay if you want, or to have it more structured in a sort of in a literature review format. So that's up to you.
What year is that in? What year is that?
Third year.
Third year.
Yeah.
So yeah, the idea of third year is to be a bit more concise with the writing and not go into too much irrelevant detail. So figuring out what's relevant and just narrowing it down.
Do you have guidelines? Oh, I'm probably jumping ahead.
No, go on.
For what, how you define each of the assessments and.
Well, we do have for some of them, but
Yeah.
not for all of them at the moment. We've
Yeah.
got some think guidelines, but they don't. At the moment, we just simply don't have them all. We've got
Yeah.
some which are online already on that in the week too, so we'll have a look at which ones are there later on. But at the moment, we've got some quiz guidelines and we've got templates with how to write them. And the same, we've got some information regarding wikis. Definitely not anything I've seen on monographs. But
What about journals?
what do you mean?
A reflective journal.
Yeah, so we've got
The guidelines around that would be good if you've got them.
I don't think we've got some rubrics around
Yeah,
reflective
some rubrics
journals,
will help,
certainly, and that's going to help, but not so much guidelines as sort of to how to write them. That needs to be written into the rubrics and into the assessments that we do. So what we're going to have a look at for a moment is the difference between formative and summative assessment. So really, is everyone clear on the difference with what they are at the moment, formative and summative? Yeah?
No.
Okay. So anything, we have two types of assessment as we're going through. Something that goes towards the student's final grade, which is summative, so it adds up to form the final grade that they get. So that's what you're looking at in that square box. That's the summative assessment. The other bits that we look at, and all the way through your teaching that you do quite naturally, would be your formative assessment. So we're going to have a look at some different types. I'm just going to work in our small groups in the tables you're in at the moment to try and come up with some differences and some types of things you might use for your formative assessment as opposed to your summative assessment. Okay? So we'll just split the butchered papers in half and have summative and formative down one side. We just want advantages of the two types of assessments.
We're probably working groups where there's some experience and some non-experience teachers.
So you might want to put down examples as well as benefits of those two types.
Yeah.
I'll just put it on to her.
I'm not sure.
Okay, there's lots of good ideas coming out. I think we'll try and share some of these. Lots of good opinions. So we've had some questions about the difference between formative and summative again, and just to clarify my perspective on the difference, formative is something that they're getting feedback on. It's designed to try and improve their learning as opposed to go towards their final grade. So it's something throughout the trimester, getting feedback, and we've had some examples when they're getting peer-to-peer feedback as well as from their lecturer or staff feedback. So there's some different ways to do that, but it's something that they can improve their learning, and that way they can go and improve their knowledge of the subject and support their summative assessments. So we can just get some, people have got some thoughts, some ideas, some benefits of summative assessments. We start with the group at the back. You've got some ideas about your formative assessments, what they might be useful for, some examples.
We've sort of said that they're more practically orientated, so
Okay.
a debate where they can whether there's two sides or whether they present something to the class and the class then asks them questions and giving them the flexibility of not telling them there's a right or wrong answer, but just trying to elicit their opinion.
Yeah, good. So all of these things that we're about to cover, have a think about how you can employ those and bring those into your subjects throughout the trimester. So some great ideas for the face-to-face activities or some of the collaborative online discussion. Yeah. What else have we got?
Getting them to teach a skill.
Okay. What do you think is beneficial about getting them to do some teaching? You've been discussing it between the group. What were those benefits of getting people to teach each other?
I find when you teach somebody a skill that it reinforces your knowledge and, you know, it assists in further learning of that particular
Yeah, great.
So I think we talked about is that mentoring that can develop too naturally in that way between students and that can carry through beyond the class as well.
Okay, so different students with different strengths to try and mentor each other.
It's also, I find in practical classes, it helps to watch a student who's learning as well, because they pick up on things that are common mistakes, whereas if they're watching someone who's an expert, they never see all of those little faults. So observing and critiquing other people performing a new skill is a really good way of them learning from other students.
Yeah, that's good. I think we've seen lots of good examples this year in practical subjects where you've got someone doing the treatment or the assessment, you've got someone being treated or assessed, and then someone critiquing that and looking out for those difficulties or things they've missed out. So a really nice way to teach and have some peer-to-peer feedback included. Anything more from you guys at the back? Formative?
Just that it's a possible way of doing some repetitive learning too. So you can set up something where they can do it over and over again. Potentially very summative, so you're just doing it one time.
Okay, yeah, that would be true. Yeah.
And that could be online or something, doesn't have to be.
So that unpressurised environment where you get a chance to repeat those things, if it's the concept quizzes, if it's some online discussions, it's one of that pressureless environment.
And I think Kelly mentioned the point discovering the type of learners, so and layering your approach. So I remember in things like anatomy, some people would be able to look at PowerPoints or read from the textbooks and get it, but when you're looking at sort of nerve pathways rather than just reading it or looking at PowerPoint, sometimes if they had body paints and painted on the nerves on the body, then the ones that were more visual learners would actually get, oh, okay, that's where it goes and how it tracks.
Okay.
So it's sort of layering the knowledge.
It's a good activity. Body painting for anatomy is a great activity.
Yes, yeah. I remember I used to do a bit of that back in the undergrad. Okay, you guys, anything other than that? Comments are formative. Can be anything.
I suppose formative will facilitate their revision towards their summative assessments.
Okay, good. Yeah, anything else?
Just that it's
Lots of
easier
things.
to perhaps keep up with students who might be falling behind. You can pick them up sooner rather than waiting 6 weeks or any point.
Yeah, good. Certainly if you use things like practice quizzes online and that aren't towards their final grade, you can pick up those students who aren't doing so well or who aren't doing so much of the content and getting things wrong. So it's a good tool to pick up those students that are perhaps struggling.
So it's pretty much an individualized form of teaching because everyone gets feedback on specifically how they're doing rather than general feedback on how the class is.
So Tina's just written students at risk about that last point on the board. For those of you who haven't taught here before, in about week 3 your program manager will just send you an email asking for any students at risk, and that's your time to just have a look through, see who hasn't even logged on to Moodle yet, see who's perhaps dropping back on the quizzes, and then the program manager will look to see if there's any consistency in those students that may be struggling with various different subjects, and then we can try and help them out, get them into their peer-assisted study groups where possible, or just have a chat with them about what's going wrong, and we can try and pick those guys up nice and early. So using the formative assessment from the start can be a really useful tool to pick up on those students and make sure they don't fall through the gaps. Okay. Anything else on formative? Any other points you want to make? You've got lots of things down. Any other ones you want to particularly comment on?
Well, some people might think it's extra work and extra stress because they're not necessarily assessed as well.
Oh, because they think there's kind of no point because it's not going towards my grade type of thing?
Yeah, I mean there are students who will think that they've got a lot on their plate and it's just extra work for them.
Okay. So do you think this formative stuff should be optional? Do you think it should be mandatory? Comments on that?
So how do you make it necessary or mandatory?
Make it relevant so that it makes it, if they do have some formative assessments, it's directly related to their summative assessments. So if you connect the two together, then they'll want to do those. So for instance, you could have a mock assessment where you're running through like a mock flag race, for instance, Tino, and so that they've got an understanding of the processes in place. They can test their knowledge to see how they'll perform in the real assessment.
Yeah, good. Hopefully that helps out a bit. Anything else to add from you guys on what's on the board? We've got quite a fill up list, but Tina's got a bit of room if there's anything else you want to add about formative.
We talked about triads. You've got triads of practitioner, patient, observer, and the actors sort of wandering around critiquing what's happening, and they're also critiquing each other.
Okay. Do you guys want to start off with summative then? Any sort of comments or things you put down about summative assessments?
We made a list. Were
Made
we
a
meant
list.
to do that?
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. What I did notice about your two lists is there any reason as to why those things are in the formative section as opposed to in the summative section? For example, blogs or role plays or debates. Any reason why they're not in the summative?
Well, we figured they could be in both, that sometimes they're actually, we were looking at summative being marked and formative being not marked.
Yeah, absolutely. But why perhaps wouldn't you put the debates in the summative assessment? Or you said
Well, I
you
had a
might?
debate last week in class, which I certainly didn't mark.
Okay.
But you could mark it.
Yeah, I think what we decided, we'll put the things here that we know are clearly, like an exam, you wouldn't make an exam unless it was a mock exam, a formative assessment. It's clearly, a summative assessment. So we started off doing that, but then when we were doing this, we'd say, oh yeah, that could fit over there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So it's difficult to silo them to say it's either summative or formative. It's more about the nature and what we can benefit from by doing this.
Where there's a right or wrong answer versus like an essay or a report might be more like a rubrics based. It still has that air of subjective corrective or marking behind, whereas there's some that clearly would be here.
And what's realistic is not often we have the time to mark long essays unless it's going to go towards a summative assessment, and students are less likely to do that. Okay.
So in this group we spoke about communication with the patient as being formative because it is rather subjective. So there is no right or wrong answer. Probably an example of what we were studying as well. Yeah.
So what do you mean by that, Tino? Like
So-
in a clinical context?
Yeah, so the way you deal, there are some right and wrong answers, but there's some right and wrong, definite don't do's and definite do's, but some things could be very opinionated, it could be the way you've been taught.
Right.
Chinese medicine is very apparent where there's different styles of treatment where, and I'm not trying to stereotype, but say a practitioner coming out of China, they would have a quicker style of treatment, and they would, very often treat people in multiple, multiple beds. Whereas someone graduating here will tend to, treat one-on-one, and probably, their questioning maybe be a little bit more holistic, or the way they speak to the patient. Whereas someone graduating in China would be very quick and direct, and they take, look at tongue and pulse, and pretty much diagnose from that and not ask as many questions. So,
but wouldn't
that
you
can
be
influence.
teaching students to do a particular style here? Like, wouldn't you want them to reflect what you teach?
Absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, there's also some, the way you talk to patients can be very different. I mean, every practitioner is a little bit different, and I suppose your flavour or the lecturer's flavour will come through.
So wouldn't you base it more on the language that they use, as in whether it's professional appropriate language?
I think it's not so much the technical things when it comes to communication with the patient. It's really just you being you and speaking to the patient.
And so it's either effective or not effective, really, isn't it?
Well, some people, because it's in their personality, when they see the patient and when they talk to the patient, there's certain parts that are not very appropriate in a clinical setting, and they don't see it themselves because that's how they are when they interact with people. So you do see a lot of students when they first go into clinic, and they say things which might be okay with friends, but not in patients. And
so that's not subjective, though, is it? Because
No, that aspect's not definitely not subjective.
So you could still assess them on that, because we're having to assess students on communication skills in clinic, and we all will, in naturopathy as well. It's a really big part. So I guess.
Is that more a competency-based thing rather than a grading?
But that would still be. I know that my cousin's doing medicine, and she, they have to go in and do say for example a palpitation on the breast or something, and they have to communicate. And depending on what they say, they could pass or fail. Like if they say, even the words she was telling me, like a funny story, but she was saying that one of the students said, "Yep, that's great. They look great." And he got failed straight away because you can't say that. So it is quite,
So that's just competent or not competent.
Well, it's pass-fail, really.
Yeah, pass-fail, that's what I mean.
But it's hard to give a score, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you actually give a score for that? Like what you actually say?
No, you don't, but you score it based on the effectiveness of it, so what the information they get from the patient. We're getting sidetracked here. So
No, I
Yeah,
definitely
it
understand
is
your
really
point,
difficult, but we
And I think
are
we'll tackle that when we come to rubrics later on, and we can.
Use the discussion forum in Moodle.
Yes, thank you, Graham. Good. Any other comment? We do need to keep it rolling. So, any other comments about the summative assessment that you've got you wanted to bring up? Otherwise,
and I'm happy to push this along at any other stage. For us here, are we having attendance as a summative or a formative?
Okay, attendance is generally, unless there's a good reason for it, traditionally at Southern School, every module was 80% attendance. That's not really written in anymore in a lot of the new programs. So it is in certain modules, but it's not in others. And if it's written, it will be part of your assessments, and it will be a pass-fail section. So it will be the last assessment will be like a pass-fail attendance. If it's not written, we can't legally enforce it. If there's a really good reason as to why that needs to be added in there, then you need to speak to your program manager, and we can do that. So we do.
Sorry, so I know when we started the flipped, attendance was compulsory because it was flipped. So that's changed now.
It's not written into, as far as I'm aware, it's not written into the details that have gone to TEXA.
Oh, okay.
So
That's
you were the impression.
I remember when we first started the whole thing, it was the whole idea is they do all that stuff outside the class, but it's compulsory. They come, so all these activities and formative stuff we're doing, they would have to get involved into it with. So they'd have to do the work before. It's like a motivating activity.
I think the message around that isn't it that you would always say it's compulsory to attend on-campus classes, but it's whether you would actually.
When it's semi-flipped or not now, it's not compulsory to come to classes.
Really?
So they don't have to come.
I'm just seeing the description.
So and they know that.
And students are going, well, so-and-so said it's not, and so-and-so said it is, and so-and-so, and the program manager, and a lecturer, and I was going,
so which is it?
Yeah. Do just send them to the program manager if you're not sure. But generally, we are living in this flexible environment, and we're trying to make it as flexible as possible. And part of that is that unless there's a good reason as to why they need to attend every session.
So we could do a flipped class almost fully online then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. the theory behind that is that they're not going to be able to understand, to implement all of the concepts, to be able to demonstrate a high understanding and a high grade if they're only going to look purely at the knowledge base of the context. They're not going to have the skills and develop those skills of the actual application, which you're going to be doing mainly in these face-to-face sessions.
So that's quite interesting for the writers then. So they need to take that into account in a way.
Yes and no. You shouldn't be writing expecting they're not going to turn up, because if they don't turn up, then that's up to the students and they may well fail. That's not something you should be writing expecting them to be.
Isn't that what you just said, that if they come to class they need to motivate them that they could do better?
Yeah.
So is that something you keep in mind with the writing, or are you just, considering
The activities, choosing the activities you do
Yeah.
in class. Yeah.
I mean, obviously we would do that naturally, but this just changed it a little bit for me actually, because I have always thought that it was.
Yeah, I don't want you to be under any false impressions that there's any way that we can penalise the students for not necessarily being there, because it's not written into the subjects as it is. It's been a lot just don't ask many questions, I won't tell you any lies, and it's been a lot for the last few years. It seems to have been like that since I've been here. There's a bit of confusion around it.
It used to be the prac classes, but we haven't really enforced it.
Now we've got must-pass elements and things like dry needling, where, in fact, dry needling has been written in 80% attendance, because something like dry needling, they can't practice it outside of class, so there is 80% attendance in that, and that's why there's a good reason, because they can't practice it outside. They have to attend 80%, and the practical assessment is a must-pass element. So generally, like one major assessment, if they do really well in 2 of their assessments and they drop down in the other, they get an average. So let's look at where they're at given the weightings. Whereas there's some subjects you might have that are must-pass, like exit examinations or the practical and dry needling, and that is an attendance-based one. But that's where there's a good reason. And some of the other things, realistically, they can learn a large amount and probably pass the subject if they want to do the majority of it online. Yeah. Okay. So is it?
Yeah, I think so. But I think for a practical class, like there's always an argument.
Yeah, if there's an argument there and it needs to be written in, the program manager will certainly listen to it and take it to the learning and teaching committee and make changes if we need to. But it's not standard across the board, certainly.
Is that reflected in the blurb up in topic 0 of each of the subjects then? Do students know that one? Can they read that?
If it's imposed, yes.
If it's imposed, so there is a minimum 80% attendance.
Because we need to make sure that they know this.
Well, you don't want to advertise the fact that they don't need to come to class.
No.
It's not a set.
I think there's a difference between expectation and what you'll get penalised for. So I would have thought, I mean, the way I look at it is you're expected to come to class because you're an on-campus student, and also being able to sell the benefits of it. So by not going, what you miss out on is this, and we can guarantee you better opportunities for success if you come along and get this opportunity. And then there's a different conversation of, well, if I don't, am I penalised? And that's, so when you're developing your stuff, I wouldn't say let that sway you. Assume that you're going to have a class full of students and people are playing by the rules of what they should be doing, rather than changing your approach because you think they won't get penalised and therefore they won't be coming to class. Because it's still the teaching and learning delivery model that we've chosen to do, which is flipped. So it has an online component and an in-class component, and that is the expectation. And that's clearly stated on the portal page as well, is that they have 3 hours of scheduled on campus, and the expectation is they do this before they come to class. So for me there's a difference between expectation and what they get penalised for.
Right, we're going to have a look at, we'll move on so we can get start getting some assessments written hopefully today. What I want you to do is have a go, and you've got some learning, some notepads in front of you, so just if you take some of the post-it notes, and I just want you to write down 3 things that you think make a good assessment and 3 things that you think make a bad assessment. And then when you've got those, just pop them up onto the good and bad on the wall over there once you've written them. So you need. I guess it's probably about time anyway. Okay, what I want to cover now, in a few minutes you're about to go through and start writing your first, or having a go at drafting out your assessments. What I want you to bear in mind and consider is some of the underpinning learning outcomes that you have for your module, which you can see in front of you. And also Tino's going around, and sitting above that is the course learning outcomes. There's 13 outcomes that we suggest that any graduate of your program should be able to do. And sitting above that at the top level is what we say is a Think graduate outcome. So any student that goes through any program within the Think colleges will come out with these 6 attributes. So if you just have a read through the piece of paper with the blue line at the top, once Tina gets around to you, and they are the Think capabilities. This other one first of all.
Do you want to take that, Tina?
Do you want to play, Tina?
You lied to me, Aileen. Oh my
Is that the number of people?
No, it's that other
We
sheet.
can share that one.
Oh yeah, no, these are all the same.
You took this way, didn't you?
No, you know that the numbers, that's alright. Maybe I got it wrong. So program institution.
Oh, it's breakdown.
And they're the same.
Yeah. Do you only do 2, Tina? Just want to photocopy one next door.
Sorry, that was me. It was my fault. I take responsibility.
We don't need that one for now anyway, we're just having a look at the Think graduate capabilities. Any questions about those Think graduate capabilities, or are they fairly straightforward? So in a 3-year degree, your contribution to your subject is making up 1/36 of the information and the learning and the development that the students will have to make up those 6 graduate capabilities. Once you have had a read through that, have a look at the 13 graduate outcomes that we've got. So they're slightly different depending on the modality. But that's what it says, that anyone coming out of that degree program should have those abilities. That's what the your individual learning outcomes are designed to meet.
Sorry. She lied to me too. Yeah, I did the same thing.
It's going to cost me my job as teacher assistant.
Thank you.
Okay, I think most of you have looked through that document, and you're going to come back to that in a moment with a basic activity. But having a look at how we've mapped these processes, so we need to have a look. At how we're going to make sure that the whole degree is going to meet those course learning outcomes, and that's where we took each of the subjects, the individual learning outcomes which you've got a copy of, and then we've mapped them to each of those course learning outcomes, and then there's some further work that looks at what types of assessment have we done, and we go through the whole degree and making sure we've got variation of assessment, and they're done at different times throughout the degree as well, so that they're not just random assessments that we've given you, they are scaffolded through the programme, so we've got different types of assessment, and it also makes sure that they're not sitting 3 exams at the same time, or they haven't got 2 presentations in the same week for the 2 different subjects sitting at that same level. You can see where your subject sits when you have a look at the overarching course, the course guide, I think it's called, when you can see the framework of the degree. You got it there, Adele?
Yeah.
It's on that. Yeah, where it sits in. So when you have a look at your framework, it looks something like this. I think it's on the second page of what you've got. That's it on there. And you can have a look and circle where your programme fits into that. Have a look at that in relation to all of those other subjects that the students will likely be sitting at the same time. So if they're a full-time student, they can have 3 other subjects, and making sure that they've got a fair and even amount of assessment work all the way through. So that's just a bit of background as to why you've got what you have got. It's kind of thought about and mapped out in that way.
Sorry, excuse me, Tim.
Yeah, go on.
With these, the actual, are they?
Yep.
Are they per year or?
No, that's the standard. Say at point of graduation,
right?
You're going to have those at those capabilities and those outcomes. Yeah. So what I want you to have a look now is to open up your specific learning outcomes and see how they relate. See what number of those graduate capabilities and course learning outcomes that they meet. So you should have between 4 to 6, sometimes a couple more learning outcomes. I just want you to write a number next to it of the course learning outcomes that you think that might meet. Does that make sense? So grabbing your, okay, so grab hold of your learning outcomes for your subject. Have a look at the course learning outcomes and see where you think that the learning outcomes would go towards supporting those course learning outcomes.
These.
Yeah, so these ones here. So we've got these. So we're looking at evaluating the efficacy of this psychology approach. What is it related to on the course learning outcomes?
09, 07.
Yeah.
Well, they've changed the program structure a little bit, so they combine with
So if you'll familiarise yourselves with the learning outcomes in your subject. Anyone got any questions about them? Happy with the type of terminology that's in there? And you're all familiar with what level you're going to be teaching at, where that sits in the programme.
So is there any relationship to, this is to a level, is there a level here that applies to a level?
No, that's not level, that's not, those course learning outcomes aren't labelled like the AQF descriptors or anything like that. They're just written to say at point of graduation they're going to have these range of skills. And some of them, like of course, the number one's about demonstrating knowledge is likely to be earlier on.
Yeah.
And more of the critical evaluation is going to be later.
How close would you want them to match, like in terms of this activity?
Just if you think they're going to significantly contribute towards that learning outcome,
okay.
then that's going to be useful.
Right.
So this is an activity to try and just keep in mind the direction and the things you might want to include when you're writing out your assessment. So we're going to have a look at how you can contribute towards that student's course learning outcome by the nature of your assessments, because your assessments aren't just to pass, they're to try and encourage learning and to try and push that student towards these graduate outcomes and capabilities. You may or may not be familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, which is a hierarchical order of basic thinking skills. So what do we bring in, and what's the most simplest form of lower order thinking as it's known? Is a simple knowledge retention and remembering and understanding facts. That's the general principle of the way a lot of courses are built. So in the early phases, there's we're heavy on the content. In the later phases, there's greater emphasis on application, analysis, evaluation, and creating. And depending on what level your subject is at, it's all different. You'll see different terminology in the way that the assessments can and should be written. So you've just been given out by Tina an example of health promotion. Do you know what level this is, Tina?
No, I don't.
Does the natural pass know what level health promotion's in?
Is that third? Third year.
It's third year, yeah.
Third year, okay. So we've got a variety of assessments in place at the moment, and this is an example of pretty much what you'll need to submit as a draft format next week based on your assessment pieces. Yeah. So for those of you who've written in the past, it's fairly similar. But what we basically need is those simple details which are on there, and then explanations to the students. So those of you who have all contributed onto the board, you've written some really good things about what's good about assessments and what's bad about assessments. And I'd encourage you to go and have a look at what some other people have written. But generally along the lines of it's really clear, it's really unambiguous. What else have we got on the good sections, Tina?
Yeah, so clear, multiple levels, fun, appropriate to the level of learning, test knowledge gained during the course. We've got learning outcomes adequately addressed, aligns with weekly learning.
Okay. What about as bad?
Shaming or embarrassing. So example, assessment in front of others, negative feedback, yeah. So receiving negative feedback in front of others, I suppose. Placing all marks on one assessment. Anxiety providing. Unclear, unambiguous. Only assessing one aspect of knowledge. So students unable to see the relevance of the assessment. Too easy, not challenging. Boring, not challenging. Unstructured, too long. Too open-ended. Too broad, lack of direction.
Can you just turn that board around? Put your hand up if you've got an essay in what you're doing. Okay. Oral presentation. 2, 3. Okay. Quizzes. Any other online quizzes or otherwise? Okay. What I wanted to do is, anyone who's got an essay, so we're going to have 4 people around this table here, going to come together. Anyone who's got a quiz of some sort on the back table, and oral presentations can stay where they are. Does anyone not fit in any of those categories?
No, I've got wiki and logs. I actually don't have any say. I was thinking of the wrong subject. So I've got logbooks.
Yeah.
And wiki and exam.
Okay, is that an end of trimester written exam?
Yeah.
Okay. If you join in with the oral presentation group, and we can discuss, we'll discuss the wiki group, the wiki section and the oral presentations together on that table.
Okay.
What you're going to do, I want you to get together in your groups, and I want you to come up with ideas about what would be common themes that would be important to include in that bit of detail that students need to know. So the things are going to include clarity of information, we might want to include a rubric, and those types of things. So get together in your small groups and discuss and start making lists about what you think you're going to need to include in your assessment guide. Okay guys, we're about ready to wrap up so you can all get home at some point tonight. You can stay and chat to these after we've done, but what we've got some really nice ideas going around and some good thoughts about how you're going to take these assessments forward. In terms of the clarity, as we've all said, it's really important for these assessments. We've got rubrics that are available. Have you handed those out, or is that just one there?
Just one.
Okay. So on the Moodle page, there's a whole list of rubrics that we've got available for you to use. Some of them are generic to written work, to online contributions, to wikis. Other subjects and other types of assessments will need rubrics written specifically. So there's lots of examples you can take, you can amend for what you want to use. But I advise to speak to your program manager to what's being generally used in that program for that subject, and we can put you on the right lines in terms of your assessment rubrics.
Whereabouts are they online?
So just in the week 2, there's a title saying rubric examples, and there's plenty of them on the Moodle page. And that's where you'll find them pretty easily. That's pretty much it. So next, if you bring with you next week your drafted assessments. So similar to the handout that you got, you're going to have each of your assessments with the weighting, the due dates, length, topics, and your explanation of your assessments. We'll bring those.
Do you need exams?
No, not the exams, no. Just what's going to be on the subject outline about the exam. So the exam will cover this, this and this, and it may be a combination of case studies, long answers, short answers, multiple choice questions. Just what they get in the subject outline at the start of the trimester. Any questions on that for next week? Right, let's get going. And then from next week we'll be looking at the content.
Yeah.
Get started on that. Okay, thank you all for today.
Thank you.
Thank you.